These are clues. Clues to a fascinating mystery that continues to challenge our imagination. The birth of the North American continent.
Hey, land where I live, tell me your story. How did you come by all of your beauty? Hey, land where I live, height of your mountains, depths of your canyons, sweep of your shoreline. How did you come by all of your beauty? Hey, land where I live, what are the secrets behind your rugged face? North America, North America.
Our planet Earth and the whole solar system formed several billion years ago as a whirling cloud of gas and dust. Slowly, the sun and planets took shape. The Earth formed a molten ball, which then gradually cooled. A solid crust began to form, all 4.5 billion years ago.
Hey, land where I live, tell me the truth. How long have you been here? Tell me the truth now.
A white, hot core of iron and nickel, mostly liquid, except at the very center where tremendous pressure keeps the material in a solid state. Between this core and the crust is a thick shell of semi-liquid, red-hot rock called the mantle. The outer crust, firm because it's cool, is very thin. The Earth cooled slowly, and when the surface temperature fell below the boiling point, water that had been evaporating as it fell began accumulating in basins and trenches. For hundreds of millions of years, torrential rains fell, eroding the exposed crust, forming rivers that carried broken rock and silt into the lakes and oceans, depositing it where it eventually hardened, and again became part of the crust. The oldest rocks yet discovered appear to be about 3.5 billion years old. They belong to that longest and earliest period of our planet's life, which we call the Precambrian era. Throughout the vast length of geological time, the Earth's crust has been in a state of slow upheaval. Earthquakes, volcanoes, buckling, warping, bending, and folding, and tearing apart to form large land masses. The temperature of the surface, heated by the sun, has remained relatively stable, but from time to time cooled so that ice sheets and glaciers spread out and then retreated to the poles to await the next ice age. They scraped the Earth's crust like giant bulldozers, cutting deep valleys, carving mountain faces, and depositing mounds of rock debris.
High up on the mountains, up where the snow lies, deep in the canyons, carved by the rivers, how did you come by all of your beauty?
For hundreds of millions of years, the Earth's crust continued to heave, while wind, rain, and ice made further changes to the surface of the planet. By the beginning of the Paleozoic era, 600 million years ago, the mighty Precambrian mountains had been worn down and much of the planet was covered by water. As time passed, the young continent split apart and then came back together. Great sections of ocean floor were pushed up high above the water, forming the Appalachian Mountains. By now, a wide variety of life forms had evolved. Plants, trees, amphibians, reptiles, small dinosaurs, turtles, and crocodiles. The continents we know today were grouped together in one large land mass called Pangaea. 180 million years ago, Pangaea began to break up, and North America was born.
There's a dance going on underground, where the rocks are all rocking around. The name of this dance, which can give you a lift, is the continental drift.
We are now certain that the continents are part of large plates of heavier rock which move like conveyor belts over the mantle. This movement is known as plate tectonics, or continental drift. The plates move at a rate of a few centimeters a year. In our terms, a very slow method of transportation, but in geological time, the impact is staggering. Around 70 million years ago, the Rocky Mountains, part of the Western Cordillera, began to form. Mountain building activity progressed along the west coast, while erosional activity continued. The Caribbean region began rising above the ocean surface some 25 million years ago. Notice how earthquakes and volcanic activity are concentrated along the plate boundaries. It is along these plate boundaries where mountains are formed. When plates collide, the crust is folded and mountains are piled up. When the crust tilts or slips along faults, the land may be uplifted. When heat and pressure from shifting plates cause the eruption of molten lava, forming volcanic mountains. Well, we've seen how the Earth formed and how our continent took shape over a period of 4.5 billion years. Still shrouded in mystery, however, is the birth of the ancient mountains of the Canadian Shield, which once stood as high as the Rockies. More than half as old as the Earth, they were likely formed before the crust broke into plates. They are made up chiefly of igneous rock, rock which originated from the upwelling of mantle material and is rich in gold, copper, nickel, and other minerals. The Appalachian Mountains were formed only 400 million years ago and include large amounts of sedimentary rock, thrust up from the ancient sea floor. Vast deposits of coal, oil, and natural gas had formed by this time under much of North America. The Rocky Mountains, also made up of both sedimentary and igneous rock, have been extensively folded and faulted. The Rockies, the Cascades, along with the Coast Ranges, the Sierra Nevadas, and the Sierra Madres form the Western Cordillera.
Cordillera, Cordillera, Rocky Mountains, mighty Sierra. Hey, mountains so high, swept by the cold winds, covered in snow, and the valleys below you. How did you come by all of your beauty?
Water, wind, and ice eroded and carved the western Cordillera into the jagged cliffs, high plateaus, and desert basins we see today, from Alaska to Mexico. For millions of years, glaciers and erosion carved the mountains of the Canadian Shield, the Appalachians, and the western Cordillera. Streams and rivers carried the sediments down and spread them out layer upon layer to form the interior plains and the Atlantic and Gulf Coast lowlands. To complete the picture of the geological face of North America today, a word about the drainage systems, the great rivers and lakes. The Great Lakes watershed, formed some 13,000 years ago during the last retreat of glacial ice, flows down through the lakes to the St. Lawrence River and on to the Atlantic Ocean. The Missouri-Mississippi watershed drains the south-central region of the continent into the Gulf of Mexico. Then there is the Mackenzie, the Colorado River system, the Rio Grande, the Columbia, and finally, the Saskatchewan-Nelson River system. This was the face of North America when the first native people arrived between 20 and 40,000 years ago.
Way back in the past, whose were the eyes that first saw your beauty, first tried to tame you?
400 years ago, man began to change the face of North America. Progress, they called it. Sometimes it was for the better. Sometimes it wasn't. But change it they did. However, along with the new, we still have the old. And slowly, but not always quietly, the natural cycle of drift, upheaval, and erosion of the thin continental crust continues, building up and wearing down, slipping, sliding, buckling, and erupting. It's taken 4.5 billion years to get where we are today.
Hey, land where I live, where will it all lead 1,000 years from now? North America.
Although North America had been settled for tens of thousands of years by people from Asia, it was virtually unknown to Europeans until the voyages of Christopher Columbus.
When Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492, what he thought that he was going to do was find a shortcut all the way to India. And when he landed over here, in his mind he was quite clear. He thought he knew exactly where he was. I mean, he thought he was in India.
He called the natives Indians. He was wrong, of course, but the name stuck.
You can read about it in a book. Take to the road and have a look, and you can find out what it took to make the map of North America.
A globe is a fairly accurate picture of the world and the various positions of the continents. But when we start to peel North America off the globe and transfer the curved surface to a flat surface, this is called a projection, we run into certain problems. We have to distort the image somehow. In this case, by making the northern region of the continent look larger than it is. That's been the problem for more than 400 years with the most common map, the Mercator map, named after its Belgian inventor. For example, the Soviet Union appears to be twice the size of Africa, but Africa is really about 35% larger. Other map makers tried to improve upon Mercator, but with limited success. The elliptical map, or equal area projection, was closer to reality, but the public never fully accepted it, because it looked like a peeled orange. Although no flat map is perfect, the one generally used, a modified conic projection, is as accurate as a curved surface can be shown on flat paper. If you want to describe where some place is in North America, something must be added to the globe. Lines of reference are required. One set of reference lines are the parallels of latitude, a series of imaginary lines running east and west, circling the globe. Because we're dealing with a sphere, we measure these lines in degrees. The best known parallel of latitude is the equator at 0 degrees latitude. It's the starting line. All other lines of latitude run parallel to it, equally spaced about 111 kilometers apart. The North Geographic Pole is 90 degrees north latitude. The South Geographic Pole is 90 degrees south latitude. At 23.5 degrees north latitude is the Tropic of Cancer. At 23.5 degrees south latitude is the Tropic of Capricorn. Let's find the position of North America in terms of latitude. What line of latitude is near the southern coast, at the border with South America? If you said 7 degrees north latitude, you'd be right. And at the northern tip of the continent, 83 degrees north latitude, only 7 degrees from the North Geographic Pole. Now, knowing the parallels of latitude won't tell you exactly where a place is located. You need a different set of reference lines running north and south, passing through both poles, the lines of longitude.
You'd have the proper attitude if you knew lines of latitude run east and west. You would not be wrong if you'd remember lines of longitude run north and south.
The line of 0 degrees longitude passes through the town of Greenwich in England. Why Greenwich instead of Medicine Hat or Panama City? Simple, really. They had to start somewhere. And since the British had the most powerful naval force, since their main observatory was at Greenwich, the choice was theirs. To place North America in terms of longitude, move west from Greenwich, until reaching the east coast of the continent. (52° west longitude), and then continue west, all the way to 168° west longitude. From coast to coast, almost 1/3 of the way around the Earth. When you know latitude and longitude, you can pinpoint any place in North America, or the world for that matter. And the spaces between the lines of latitude and longitude are further subdivided into 60 lines called minutes. Havana, Cuba, for example, is located at approximately 82° 15 minutes west longitude by 22° 40 minutes north latitude. In fact, any place in the world, including where you now sit, can be pinpointed with a high degree of accuracy. One of the oddest things about traveling any real distance around the Earth is that if you're traveling west, and if you could fly fast enough and outrace the sun, you can get to where you're going before you start out. You can leave at noon and get there at 10 o'clock the same morning. At least, that's what the clock at your destination said. The reason for this is the whole business of time zones. As we move east and west of a vertical line that passes through, that's right, Greenwich, England, we run into a series of time zones, sometimes following the lines of longitude. They are often bent to follow provincial and state boundaries. As we travel west, we lose an hour in each zone. If it's noon in Greenwich, it will be 11, 10, 9, 8 o'clock in the morning in Maine and Nova Scotia. Why do we need time zones? Well, if it's 8 o'clock on a bright sunny morning in Nova Scotia, it is 4 hours earlier, 4 a.m., still dark in Vancouver, because the sun has not yet reached that part of the continent. When it does, Vancouver will have a bright sunny morning at 8 o'clock as well. Time zones, then, allow us to have days and nights relatively the same as everyone else. Let's put North America in perspective. The three continents, North America, South America, and Africa, seem to be about the same size, and all are shaped like triangles. But in fact, North America is bigger than South America, but not as big as Africa. Canada is slightly larger than the United States. Mexico and the Caribbean region are almost half the size of the United States.
Out of sight of land, the ocean wide surrounds me, far from every shore.
86% of planet Earth is covered with water. So, why didn't they call it Planet Water? Fair is fair.
Now let's look at North America today, not only as it looks on a map, but through the lens of a film camera.
From the frozen Arctic Ocean to the Caribbean Sea, travel across the continent, a change you're bound to see. 'Cause every region's different and special in its way, showing us the face of North America today.
The Western Cordillera. interior plains. The Canadian Shield. The Appalachians. The Atlantic and Gulf Coast lowlands. The Caribbean region. All of this is North America.
From the frozen Arctic Ocean to the Caribbean Sea, traveled across the continent and change we sure did see. Every region's different, special in its way, showing us the face of North America today.
And now for the weather. Outside our studios here in Montreal, it's 28 beautiful, hot, sunshine degrees.
Rain this morning in Montreal, tapering off by midday. Drizzle expected later this evening.
More than 15 centimeters of snow fell in Montreal last night, stranding motorists and closing Dorval and Mirabel airports. 24 degrees Celsius and overcast to the north of us, clear, windy, and cool to the south. Here in town, 20 degrees and raining. And that's the weather for today.
Hills and sky, cloud and sun, darkening sky, storm begun. Oh, the sky is moving again, and the weather is changing.
around the coast of British Columbia, the climate is cool and dry in summer, mild, cloudy, and wet in winter. It's about the same every year. The winters are warm on the Gulf Coast of Yucatan, amigo. The summers, however, are very hot and humid. Now you take your Ottawa Valley. It's cold in January, about -10 degrees Celsius. Nice and warm in July, though, about 21 degrees. That's the average. Some rain, lots of snow in winter.
Calm and storm, breeze and gale, lightning, thunder, snow and hail. Oh, the sky is moving again, and the weather is changing.
By measuring the temperature and precipitation, rain and snow, of various regions of the continent, in summer and in winter, better still, in all 4 seasons, then, by combining them, you should be able to describe the climate of a particular region and compare it with other regions. To begin with, climate depends in part on where you are, the latitude, in relation to the sun. The angle at which the sun's rays strike the Earth's surface partially determine the climate of each region. When the sun's rays are at a low angle, it is cool, often very cool. In the Arctic, there is a whole season when the sun is hidden from sight. When the sun's rays are directly overhead, it is hot. The warming effects of the rays are much greater where they are concentrated than where they are spread out. Also, when the sun is overhead, the heat is more intense because there's less atmosphere for the rays to penetrate. The Earth rotates on a fixed, tilted axis as it revolves around the sun. Therefore, the sun's rays are directly overhead in different regions at different times of the year. The effect created is that as the Earth rotates around the sun appears to move north across the equator, warming the land and the water in its path until it is directly over a line known as the Tropic of Cancer, giving us our warm summers in the north and hot summers to the south. Then winter begins as the sun appears to retreat south on its annual cycle. But the sun does not move. The Earth moves, and it is this movement that causes the change of seasons. Still other factors affect climate.
Why is it hot in Ohio when up in the Yukon they've got snow? Why is it dry in the Nevada sand when it's raining and raining and raining in Newfoundland?
Why, for instance, is it much colder in the Midwest in winter than it is along either the east or west coast at the same latitude? Large bodies of water, including lakes, warm up and cool down more slowly than large land masses. So the water tends to be cooler than the land in summer and warmer than the land in winter, creating a moderating effect on climate. But ocean currents have an even further effect on climate. By heating up or cooling down coastal waters, they bring about unique climate conditions. Along the east coast, the Gulf Stream has a warming effect, while the Labrador Current brings cold Arctic water south, meeting the Gulf Stream off the east coast of Nova Scotia and Maine. On the west coast, the North Pacific Current has a warming effect along the northern coast, while the California Current makes the southern coastal regions cooler than might be expected. Farther south, the equatorial countercurrent has a strong warming influence along the coast of Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Panama. For the heat generated by the currents to influence the land, winds are necessary. Winds that sweep in across the oceans, that warm up or cool down over coastal waters, and continue into the interior of the continent. In North America, the prevailing winds are from the west, blowing in from the Pacific, moving eastward to the Atlantic. Other important winds are from the north. often releasing moisture in the form of rain or snow along the coast, bringing dry winds to the interior, and warm, wet winds from the south, often carrying their moisture deep into the continent. In the Midwest, hot and cold, moist and dry air masses meet and clash, causing violent weather conditions, sudden summer and winter storms.
Tornado on the prairies, where the raging winds do blow, and the burning desert sand is blanketed in snow. How it changes so.
Over the great oceans, large air masses, hot and cold, collide with fearsome results. Hurricanes sweep in over the coast with devastating power. Altitude also has an effect on climate. At the higher altitudes, the thinner air traps and holds heat less efficiently. And so the higher you go, the colder it gets, by 2 degrees Celsius every 300 meters. Landforms affect climate in another way. For example, warm, moist air from the Pacific flows up the slopes of the west coast mountain ranges. As the air cools, it loses its moisture, dries out, and creates rain shadows in the valleys and desert basins, eventually bringing warm, dry air to the Central Plains region. The reason this pattern has developed is that as air is heated, its ability to hold moisture increases. As it cools, it loses that ability, and rain falls.
Oh, take me from the northern land, the land of ice and snow. Take me to the desert sand, where the sun does burn me so.
The latitude, the time of year, ocean currents, wind currents, the altitude, all these affect climate and create distinct climate zones. The Arctic region. Here, there is no real summer, although warm spells may occur in July and August. Winters are bitterly cold and very long. Rainfall is as low as in a southern desert. Permanently frozen ground, permafrost, ranges in depth from more than 30 meters to less than 1 meter and fluctuates with the season. The subarctic, where the winters are still cold, but the summers are slightly warmer and longer, and there is some rainfall in summer. Permafrost also occurs in the northern portion of the region. The maritime west coast, with heavy precipitation throughout the year and with mild winters and mild summers. The mountain regions, cold in the high mountains, mild winters and warm summers in the sheltered valleys. Some areas have rainfall. Others are dry. The humid continental region. The summers are warm, the winters more severe in the north, milder in the south. Most of the rainfall is during the summer, heavier in the east and lighter in the west. The semi-arid region. Here there is only infrequent rain. Winters are cold in the north and mild in the south. Summers are warm in the north and hot in the south. The desert region, very little or no rain. Hot summer and winter. Cooler in the mountain regions. The Mediterranean region, where the climate resembles the coastal areas of the Mediterranean. Mild winters, hot, dry summers, cooler on the coast, rain mostly in winter. the humid subtropical region. Hot summers, very mild winters, colder in the north. Rain heavier along the coast, mostly in summer. The tropical region, hot in summer, warm in winter. Rainfall throughout most of the year. From the Mediterranean to the desert, from the Arctic to tropical, from the semi-arid to the continental, the climate's always topical. That's our climate, the climate of North America. Imagine that the Earth's axis were to tilt another 23.5 degrees. What would be the implications for the North American climate? Would there still be a tropical zone? How severe would the Midwest winters be? Would there be more precipitation in the Arctic? Though it's virtually impossible for the Earth to be moved off axis, climate is altered in less catastrophic ways. Man does it unintentionally, sometimes. Here is an ambitious hydroelectric project which will flood millions of hectares of land. No one knows what moderating effects this new lake will have on the surrounding area. Man, on the other hand, can make purposeful changes. The results benefit all of us, insofar as we understand the Earth.
Sun and rain, soil and seed, seeds of life, they take what they need. Oh, the world is turning around as the new life is growing.
High on the windswept slopes of the Sierra Nevada mountains in California stands the bristlecone pine, almost 5,000 years old, gnarled and bent from the wind, still growing, still producing seeds, in arid, sun-baked desert soil, unsuitable for most plant life. The oldest living thing on Earth, the result of a very special combination of climate, vegetation, and soil. In North America, a wide variety of vegetation flourishes, everything from giant trees to desert cactus, from vast grasslands to Arctic muskeg, from apples and cherries to bananas and mangoes.
That's right, I know. Wherever I go, I see things grow in nature's garden. It's quite a show, here's what I know. We could be living on the moon where nothing grows, so it's time for a celebration and take a look at our vegetation and make a note of its location here in North America.
climate, as one could assume, determines the vegetation found in a region. As we move south towards the equator from the higher latitudes, the changes are evident. In simple terms, plant life changes and adapts to different heat intensities, light levels, and moisture content. For example, the Niagara fruit belt between Lake Erie and Lake Ontario is ideal for growing fruit trees and grapevines. Altitude, as well as latitude, regulates the rate of growth and type of vegetation. As you climb a mountain, you pass through several distinct zones of vegetation, forest, alpine meadow, and mosses. Why? Basically for two reasons. There is very little soil on a mountainside, and it is usually quite poor in available nutrients. Secondly, every 300 meters in altitude, the temperature drops 2 degrees Celsius. I met a wildlife photographer once in Utah who said that he could duplicate the basic vegetation and wildlife of any forest region in Canada or the United States by just walking up the side of one of the mountains near where he lived. Unlike a mountain slope, low-lying desert basins tend to produce uniform vegetation because temperature and moisture are relatively the same throughout the desert area. Let's look at the natural vegetation regions of North America. The tundra, the 4 major forest regions, the grasslands, the desert, and the highlands. The tundra, the cold desert of the far north, harbors long, severe winters with little or no sunlight and brief summers. Mosses and lichens cling to the windswept rock, which shelters here and there patches of low grass and ground-hugging flowers. Precipitation is as rare as in a southern desert, and the ground just under the surface is permanently frozen. In fact, there is a great deal of moisture here, but as ice in the permafrost, it is of no use to the vegetation. The coniferous forests are found in the mid-north regions from coast to coast and in the southeast. Coniferous trees are the cone-bearing evergreens, the pines and the spruces, with needles instead of leaves. Because their sap resists freezing, they can withstand longer, colder winters. Mixed forests that include deciduous trees as well as conifers are found in the east, from the Maritimes to the Great Lakes, and south to the Gulf of Mexico. Deciduous trees such as maples, hickories, poplars, and oaks grow broad, flat leaves in spring and summer, shedding them in the fall, lying dormant in the winter.
From season to season, it's nature's game to turn the leaves green and to turn them to flame. And they fall to the ground and die. And the bare trees against the sky, and in spring they are born again.
Tropical rainforests are found in southern Florida, the Caribbean region, and parts of Mexico, where it is wet and warm all year round. These broad-leafed hardwood trees don't shed their leaves all at once, and so remain evergreen all year. Coffee and coca flourish in the tropical rainforest. The Mediterranean scrub forest is mostly in central and southern California. Limited moisture in this region accounts for the vegetation's sparse and stunted appearance. Vast grasslands are found in the interior of the continent, where the summers are hot and dry. Gentle rolling hills stretch from horizon to horizon.
I've been to the prairies where the grass grows tall and the buffalo run, where they harvest the grain before the fall in the late summer sun. But farther south there's a change. The winds blow soft across the range. They harvest the winter wheat before the summer's begun.
Desert regions are found in the southwest. These areas can be flat, hilly, and even mountainous. The main characteristic is that there is insufficient moisture for a continuous cover of vegetation. Here we find sagebrush, bunch grass, yuccas, and cactus. Interestingly, many islands of the Caribbean are mini versions of the North American continent. One island can yield coniferous forests, rainforests, jungle, grasslands, and deserts. Finally, the highlands in California, and from Mexico to Panama, where little rain falls and where mixed vegetation contrasts with barren landscape. Vegetation, then, in one form or another, seeks to cover the continent. Guided by climate, the plants, from the giant fir trees to the gentle fern, sink their roots into the life-giving soil and feed upon the nutrients. Soil itself is a result of a unique combination of elements and events. The presence of glaciers on the North American continent today recalls a time when glacial ice and snow covered all of Canada and northern regions of the United States. Scraping and grinding their way south, the glaciers dumped debris, gravel, sand, and clay. Year after year, rain, wind, and ice continued to gnaw at rock, pulverizing it into minute particles, which are then transported to low-lying areas. Here, dead plants, providing the food for microscopic animals, are reduced to humus. The humus and the finely broken rock are, in turn, mixed by countless billions of insects and animals. This is what it looks like. This is the soil, the medium in which plants and trees grow. It takes centuries to build a few centimeters of precious soil. Since the living topsoil is rich in organic matter, it is more fertile than the subsoil. Plants can change the soil to their own needs. The result is that different soil zones roughly match the vegetation zones. Conifers, for example, prefer acid soils. So where climate is favorable to their growth, they convert the soil over hundreds of years to acid soil.
Circle of nature, circle of life, growing and decaying in the circle of life. Life that is decaying feeds the new life. Circle of nature, circle of life. Circle of nature, making things grow, building from decay, never so slow. New life from old life, that's nature's flow. Circle of nature, making things grow.
The cycle works fairly well, most of the time, unless someone or something upsets it, like fire or drought. Violent storms can be a hazard as well, destroying valuable crops, washing away or blowing away precious topsoil. More often, rivers and winds quietly and unobserved, constantly carry away the soil. Sometimes man and climate combine to make one of the biggest hazards of all, like the Dust Bowl tragedy in the Midwest during the Depression years of the 1930s. Several dry years parched the overworked grassland soil, while wind stripped away what little topsoil was left. We're learning, slowly, and we try to do something about it. To get the problems out in the open, to discuss them, and search for solutions. For some time now, scientists have been studying storm patterns, always with the hope that someday they may be able to divert the course of a storm. And cloud seeding experiments have been conducted for over a decade. The ever-increasing world population must be fed. However we modify nature to meet this need, the basic relationship will always exist between climate, soil, vegetation, and man. Cities full of people. A continent full of people. Where did they all come from? And why did they come here, to this place?
It's a carnival, just like a carnival. It's a carnival. All the faces, all the different races, all the different places in North America, in open spaces, in marketplaces, all the faces of North America. It's a carnival, it looks just like a carnival. It's a carnival. Look for the traces of native races in all the places of North America. It's a carnival, just like a carnival. It's a carnival.
The first people to inhabit the North American continent were probably Asian hunters, who followed the woolly mammoths and herds of caribou across land in what is now the Bering Strait during the last two periods of glaciation, between 20,000 and 40,000 years ago. Their descendants migrated southward to what is now Mexico and eventually into South America. For thousands of years, they hunted and fished and gathered wild plants, adapting well to their new environment. So well, in fact, that many of them settled and became farmers. Later, communities developed into great nations with cities, canals, and pyramids, with their own cultures, religions, and systems of law. They were the Toltecs, the Aztecs, the Mayans of Mexico and Central America, and the Incas of Peru. The ruins of their once great cities tell us of early civilizations rivaling the ancient Egyptians with their own systems of mathematics, astronomy, and medicine. While some built cities, others trekked into the great basins and interior plains to cultivate the land and to hunt game.
We're the first to climb the mountains and to reach the central plains, hunting buffalo and caribou and making flour from grain.
They became the cliff dwellers of Colorado, the mound builders of the Mississippi Valley, the Iroquois of the Northeast, the Pueblo Indians of the Southwest.
The trails that they traveled became our great highways, and their camping places are the cities of today.
They spoke in many different languages, and their way of life, their religions, and their cultures were a reflection of the land they lived in. They were the original pioneers. The first Europeans to arrive in North America were probably the Vikings about 1,000 years ago, but they failed to establish permanent settlement. 500 years later, explorers from Spain, Portugal, and England, searching for a sea route to the riches of the Orient, landed on the shores of North America. In the Caribbean, Columbus was met by island natives, the Arawaks, whom he mistakenly called Indians. Within 50 years, Spain had conquered the natives and began to build a vast empire in the southern regions of the New World. They plundered the gold and silver. Yet, ironically, the crops they found the natives cultivating, such as tomatoes, corn, and potatoes, were, over the long haul of history, to prove more valuable. The native people fled from their villages and were forced to work in mines and on plantations. While the Spanish mapped the southern regions, the French explored the northeast coast and followed the St. Lawrence River and other natural waterways into the interior of the continent in search of mineral wealth. Instead, they discovered unexpected riches in furs and established forts and settlements to protect their interests. The French and British, joined soon after by the Dutch, advanced deeper and deeper into the continent. By the late 1600s, the British had established the Hudson Bay Company, their big move into the fur trade. Slaves were brought from Africa to work in the cane fields of the Caribbean and in the mines of Central America. By the middle of the next century, during the 1750s, 60s, and 70s, Spain, France, and England struggled for control of the continent. By 1763, the British had defeated the French, and all territory east of the Mississippi became British, while Spain retained the territories west of this great river. The English also took possession of Bermuda, Jamaica, and the Bahama Islands to protect their sugar and timber interests. But 13 years later, in 1776, the British colonies on the East Coast rebelled against the mother country and declared their independence. Within 50 years, the Spanish colonists revolted and Spain's empire crumbled. In the 1800s, settlers from Scotland, Ireland, Germany, and Eastern European countries such as Poland came over in desperate search of farmland. Meanwhile, explorers and settlers pushed westward. The railways followed, some tracing the routes of the wagon trains, joining East Coast with West Coast. Competition for land led to bloody Indian wars on the Central Plains. The face of the continent was changing, and changing fast. The resources of the land determined where these hearty settlers built their communities. New communities sprang up where settlers had access to water, natural resources, and fertile land. On the Atlantic and Gulf Coast lowlands, there were great forests to feed the lumber mills. Good climate, ocean ports and inland waterways for trade, and people, more people, providing a ready-made market for goods. The St. Lawrence and the Great Lakes system was a marine highway, offering good summer ports for the shipping of produce from the rich soils along the shores of the lakes and the fish catches and lumber from the region. Although the interior plains were dry and flat, the soil was ideal for corn and grains. Settlements, however, were few and far between. It was often a lonely life for the Midwest homesteaders, who were encouraged to settle here by promises of free land and supplies. In the western Cordillera, there were ocean ports, a gentle climate, and excellent growing conditions in the valleys and coastal regions. The Caribbean region had lush rain forests and a warm tropical climate, ideal for crops such as sugarcane, citrus fruits, and rubber, and sheltered ports and harbors. Large sections of the continent were unattractive for settlement for various reasons. Transportation was nearly impossible, and areas such as the far north, the Canadian Shield, and the Rockies were inhospitable. Then came the 20th century. Immigrants from all over Europe and parts of Asia poured into North America looking for work, religious and political freedom, a piece of land to call their own. While North America received its share of immigrants year after year, there began a subtle yet powerful migration within the continent itself. At the turn of the century, machinery brought about a major change in the type of work people did. Mechanized equipment began to displace farm laborers. These people turned to the cities for work in the factories, where they could be readily employed in mass production assembly lines. Nearly 75% of all people in North America now live in cities. Over half the population are concentrated in super cities.
Gonna pack my suitcase, move on down the line. I'm gonna leave my farm, move on down the line. I'm going to the city to find me a big gold mine. Gonna leave the country to get by without me. Gonna move to the city to see what I can see. That's what everybody doing, so it might as well be me.
From San Francisco to San Diego, a continuous city, 20 million people. From Chicago to Toronto, 40 million people. From Boston to New York to Washington, 80 million people. A vision of the future. Today's science fiction may indeed be the reality of tomorrow. The early native people lived in harmony with their environment. But today, when 350 million people are competing for a place to live, problems occur.
The city's full of people, full of people. We know where they come from, but where they going to? Where are they going to? Where are they going to? Where are we going to? How are we going to feed them all? Where are they going to live? What kind of air shall we breathe? Where are we going to? Where are we going to? Where are we going to?
On the other hand, there are remarkable advantages to living in large numbers. But if we assume that the population will continue to grow beyond the present, how will we adjust and provide the necessities for a full, rich life? What if we could change the face of North America? Bring water into the interior plains to raise crops. Warm up the climate in the far north so that it could be used for agriculture and new settlements. Drain the huge swamplands of Panama and Costa Rica. Whatever we decide to do, we will have to tackle the future with the same bold spirit as those who settled this land.
I heard an old man say, times are hard today, it's time to move away from here. Where are we going to? What are we going to do? Can we start anew today? Where are we going to? 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 Where are we going to?
A strawberry. It looks normal. It's even tasty. But it doesn't grow the way a normal strawberry does, beginning as a seed in the ground. This strawberry was artificially created in an agricultural laboratory. Once planted, it grows faster than nature's own product and is almost immune to disease. At this moment, hundreds of thousands of boxes of these strawberries are on their way to neighborhood supermarkets all over North America. To the grasslands, deserts, and forest regions, the pioneers came, facing unrelenting hardships, relying entirely on their own resourcefulness. In the eastern wilderness of North America, the first step was to clear the land, a backbreaking and soul-wrenching task.
It took a good, strong man to work the land. They were long, hard days in the old, hard ways. Things are different now. No more one-horse plow. Drive a big machine. Keep my hands all clean. If you want to be a farmer, you have to love to work the ground, to plow and sow and reap and mow as the seasons turn around. That old family farm with its country charm can't fill the city's needs, million mouths to feed. La 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 da 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 da
On the prairies, the prairie farm spreads 1,000 hectares, 10 times the size of most eastern mixed farms. Your grandparents wouldn't recognize today's successful farmer who must invest $500,000 in machinery and technology. But even with his charts and computers, the wheat farmer, like every other farmer, is dependent on the climate, the soil, and the physical geography of the land. Wheat requires a hot, reasonably dry summer growing season. Planted in the spring, it is harvested in late summer. Wheat also needs the right kind of soil, the right combination of sand, clay, and humus. Rain is also critical. A wet August can rot the crops. Too little rain, and the crops wither in the field. To the south, where the winters are milder, there is a winter wheat region, where they plant wheat in the fall. Throughout the winter, strong root systems develop. And in the spring, rapid growth allows for an early summer harvest. Corn is a staple product which feeds livestock as well as people. It requires a hot, humid summer season combined with humus-rich soil. Trees bearing apples, peaches, pears, plums, and cherries are temperate trees. Ideal growing conditions for these trees exist in the valleys of the Appalachian Mountains, all the way from the Annapolis Valley to Georgia, in the Niagara region, and in the sheltered valleys of the Western Cordillera, from the Okanagan Valley in British Columbia to California. These regions are well drained and experience similar long winter cold spells with early springs and warm summers.
Don't have to pick by hand, do you understand? There's a new machine, keeps your hands all clean.
In the southern regions of North America, other types of fruit trees, the citrus, are cultivated. Requiring gentle winters, free of frost, these trees, which include the orange, grapefruit, lemon, and lime, are grown from California across to Florida and south throughout the islands of the Caribbean. When fertile land is located near cities, farmers are encouraged to work the land intensively. Perishable vegetables and fruit from what is called market gardens can be delivered rapidly and cheaply because the produce requires no processing. The Holland Marsh in Ontario is among the richest gardening areas in Canada. Originally a swamp, it had to be drained, and today pumps still control the water level. Now, the spongy, black soil easily absorbs moisture and heat to stimulate rapid growth. On the other side of the continent, in the Imperial Valley of California, farmers faced the opposite problem, a lack of moisture. Irrigation was the answer. Canals now nourish the sands and clays deposited by the Colorado River. Because the sun shines 360 days a year, this valley and others like it in California and Mexico supply the supermarkets of North America year-round. This farmer needs 50 millimeters of rainfall for his lettuce, cabbages, carrots, and beets. No more, no less. It's already on its way from this dam at Lake Mead, more than 600 kilometers away. He'll pay for it, probably about $50 a day, but it will be worth it. In fact, his greatest fear will be rain from the sky. that will muddy his fields, upset his tightly planned growing schedule, and wash away nutrients and insecticides.
Gotta take it from the farmer, gotta take it to the town, gotta feed the city people, gotta turn that train around.
Wheat, fruit, and vegetables are often transported thousands of kilometers, sometimes halfway around the world before they reach their markets and the dinner table. Some regions lend themselves to a wide range of farming operations. Side by side with their neighbors, some grow grain, while others raise livestock. Still others practice mixed farming. Dairy farming, cotton, and tobacco. In the Caribbean region, along with tropical fruits and vegetables, sugarcane is a vital part of the economy. Like sugarcane, cotton is one of the plantation operations that is historically linked with slavery. In the past, it thrived on large numbers of people working in the fields, often for little or no money. Even today, the exploitation and mistreatment of migrant workers still makes headlines. But slowly, new technology is changing the concept of farming. Agriculture is now a complex and challenging science. Farmers go to university to study business, accounting, mechanical and computer technology, chemistry, and biology. Today's farmer needs to know about the new fertilizers and pesticides, new developments in crossbreeding. However, many of the old problems still exist. Disease and sudden changes in weather still plague the farm industry. Like any business, there are good years and bad years, but there are some problems pioneer farmers could never have foreseen. Cities creeping across the fertile farmlands.
The farmer drove his tractor, he drove it down the lane. But when he saw what they'd done to the land, he drove it back again.
But by the time he got home, his old barn was gone, and in its place was a 40-story high-rise.
The farmer has good reasons to worry about his future. Rising costs, fuel prices, high interest rates, price restrictions, wages and labor problems. For the long hours he puts in, the return on his investment, on his time and effort, often doesn't pay off.
The wind blows through the empty barn. The weeds are growing across the empty farm. The farm is dead. The old farmer is gone.
We are already experiencing a trend toward giant company-owned holdings. artificial foods, giant greenhouses where climate and soil are rigidly controlled, superior new breeds of plants that yield 10 times the crop of the parent plant. The day of the one-man, one-horse farm has long since given way to convoys of combines. As population increases, what will be required of tomorrow's farmer?
That old family farm with its country charm can't fill the city's need, a million mouths to feed.
December 3rd, 1979. 1.5 million copies of the New York Times are published. Not a particularly eventful day, except that 77,000 mature trees were felled and ground to pulp for just that one edition. That one day. This is a land bulldozed by glaciers. It is a land of the long winter. It is a land of countless lakes, streams, and endless bogs. In this harsh land, the tough conifers took root and claimed the land as their own. From the eastern shores of Canada to the rugged interior of Alaska stretches a continuous blanket of conifers. This boreal, or northern forest, is populated chiefly with spruce, pine, and fir. The conifer is a softwood tree which bears a cone-like fruit. Its most familiar feature, a needle-like leaf, provides the secret of its successful growth in a bitter environment. These sharp leaves contain more chlorophyll than the leaves on the broadleaf trees. With extra chlorophyll, they can produce food in poor soils during short periods of light where other trees wither. Whereas the conifer can survive in a bleak land, it flourishes in favorable conditions. On the west coast of North America, a dense rainforest ribbons the Pacific as far south as California. Here, the Douglas fir, the sequoia, and the redwood, nourished by the moist winds from the Pacific, soar to the height of cathedrals. Fed by the same moisture-laden air as their cousins, another belt of lesser giants penetrates the continent. The towering spruce, pine, and larch. On the east coast, the conifers thrive in the Appalachians and on the coastal lowland. Coaxed by the warm Georgia sun, the pine tree shoots to maturity 4 times faster than its relatives in the boreal regions.
Spruce and the cedar, the fir and the pine, evergreen, evergreen, forever green, evergreen.
A change takes place in the interior of the continent. Here the broadleaf trees, such as the oak, elm, and maple, spread inland beyond the Mississippi, except where they've been leveled to make way for farmland. These broadleaf varieties are hardwoods known as deciduous. Each year they shed their leaves and endure the deep winter snows by simply ceasing to grow. Finally, in remarkable contrast, the tropical rainforests. In this lush environment, each tree sends its spine skyward to tap its share of the sun. These trees create a canopy world, a world of perpetual darkness.
Where the sun is always warm and the rain does fall, there you'll find the best woods of all. You'll find the rosewood and the walnut and the mahogany. You'll find the rosewood and the walnut and the mahogany. Oh, rosewood, I mean the walnut and the mahogany. You see, rosewood.
Today, about 1/3 of the North American landscape is covered by forest. In times past, so much more vast and healthy were the forests that the first to plunder them thought they were inexhaustible. The early pioneers assaulted the mighty eastern forests, which at that time were populated by trees that rivaled the great western stands. While the tree provided the first settler with wood for fuel, housing, furniture, and implements, he still regarded it as his enemy. In part, he was right, for he couldn't feed the family on bark and branches, so slash and burn he did to prepare the land for crops. Oh, there were immediate signs of success. Rhode Island, for example, by the middle 1700s had been stripped of even firewood, but Rhode Island was merely a small bare patch compared to the way Europeans had devastated some of their great forests. To keep her navy afloat and fighting, the British turned to the colonies to provide timber, particularly the tall, straight white pines for ships' masts. The critical value of timber resources slowly began to dawn on a few North Americans. The first naval blow of the War of Independence was struck off Maine as revolutionaries tried to stop the British from capturing a shipment of lumber. However, Canada was only too eager to supply Britain. By 1806, rafts of prime squared timber were being guided down the Ottawa River. Never mind that it took 100 years to grow these trees, there were more, many more, over the next hill. Within half a century, as the British began to phase out wooden ships for iron vessels, a new market for lumber was developing. The great American migration westward was gobbling up its own forests for railway ties, telegraph poles, and frame housing. Again, Canadian lumberjacks would meet the demand. First, they felled the forests of the Great Lakes and then tackled the western giants.
Timber, timber, and the lord of the forest comes crashing to the ground. A man could be a lumberjack working in the forests of the West. The life was hard and dangerous, and so they only took the very best. Timber, timber, and the lord of the forest comes crashing to the ground. You need a strong man in the woods, a man who knew just how to face the facts of harvesting the forest with a rope across cuts or an axe. Timber, timber, and the lord of the forest comes crashing to the ground.
Today, the cry, timber, is drowned out by the sound of machinery. In a Pacific logging operation, 10-ton trees topple in mere minutes under the bite of the chainsaw. Once down, the trees are stripped of their branches and cut into manageable lengths. The logs are then dragged to a loading area where they're juggled into place on tractor trailers. In cases where the logging operation is many kilometers from the sawmill, the logs are hauled to water landings. There, rounded up by boom boats, they are towed in huge rafts to the mills. At the mill, powerful jets of water strip the logs of their bark. Those logs intended for construction go through a series of sawing operations to reduce them to the desired board sizes. Higher quality logs are selected for the manufacture of plywood. After debarking, these logs are peeled into thin, continuous sheets. Cut to a standard size, the sheets are glued with the grain crisscrossing. High-grade plywood sheets are used for wall paneling, the rough type for construction. Plywood has a remarkable strength. Pound for pound, it's stronger than steel. On the East Coast, machinery is more than equal to the task of logging the smaller forests. In Canada, logs are still piled on rivers to await the spring free-for-all to the distant mill. More and more, however, year-round rail and road transportation is replacing the annual spring drive. The soft woods of the eastern regions are an excellent source for pulp and paper. A tree is composed of countless millions of microscopic, densely packed fibers. In order to make paper, these fibers must first be separated by shredding and chemically dissolving the natural glue that binds them. The result is pulp which is bleached and then mixed with 99% water. This mix is then drained on a moving screen to allow the fibers to settle out. Forming a damp sheet, the fibers are now interlocked in a tangle which gives paper its strength. The sheet passes through rollers and dryers and is wound continuously at 60 kilometers per hour. Pulp and paper is a massive industry in Canada, so much so that Canadians produce 4 out of every 10 pages of newsprint read in the world.
Birch canoes and gumwood doors, rosewood bowls and pinewood floors, cedar fences, oaken stairs, walnut panels, maple chairs, pencil and paper and matches too, baseball bats and building blocks. All the trees that grace the earth, do we appreciate their worth? Pencil and paper and matches too, baseball bats and building blocks. All the trees that grace the earth, do we appreciate their worth?
While the United States produces more forest products than Canada, Canada can still claim to be the forest nation. Wood products and paper account for nearly 20% of the value of all goods Canada ships out of the country. It is by far her largest primary industry, employing hundreds of thousands of people. If the wealth of a nation is so closely tied to one renewable resource, what means are we taking to protect it? The answer lies partially in a logging technique known as clear cutting. In a somewhat checkerboard fashion, an entire crop of trees is removed in sections. In time, the patches that remain seed the clear-cut areas, which can then be harvested again in the next century. Each year, government determines the allowable cut, which should in theory be balanced by new growth. Still, the question remains, are the forests holding their own? It's doubtful. In Canada, experts claim that hundreds of thousands of hectares a year are not being renewed. And calamity is ever lurking in the forests, sometimes human carelessness, sometimes natural disaster. The spruce budworm, in its caterpillar stage, can kill off vast stretches of healthy forest. Even if a nation's wealth is not directly dependent on its forests, its health is. Forests act as spongy reservoirs, which regulate the flow of surface water. In the spring, the forest floor absorbs the rain and reduces flooding. During dry spells, it releases the water to keep the rivers flowing. Roots hold the slopes intact and prevent the erosion of topsoil. For example, rivers which run through farmland carry away 1,000 times more sediment than a river running through a pine forest. Strip North America of its trees and turn the land into a lifeless desert.
I walk into the woods where the tall trees surround me, sheltering branches spread over all that lives around me.
The very wealth, health, and peace of mind of North Americans
hinges on the forests. As long as we continue to exploit our timber resources, we need more intensive reforestation programs. We need bold ideas for renewing vacant land with new types of fast-growing trees. We need to know that another 77,000 trees are growing for tomorrow's edition of the New York Times.
Silver mines of the sea. So plentiful that explorers to the Americas told tales of fish that stopped the passage of their ships. In such swarms, they claimed that the fish could be scooped up in baskets. Teeming seas, countless numbers, a boundless resource. So it was once thought. In 1497, an imaginative mariner, John Cabot, serving the flag of England, set out in search of a northwest passage to Asia and its fabled riches. Following old Icelandic routes, he encountered Arctic ice. He then probed south along the coast of Labrador and discovered instead riches in the form of codfish, very likely off the coast of Newfoundland. Fish in the 16th century was a major source of protein for Europeans. Few could afford meat. Though Cabot was not actually the first to discover fish in the new found land, his accounts were the first to be published, and these accounts soon attracted English, French, and Spanish fishing fleets. Fishing, then, was the first North American resource to be systematically exploited by Europeans, and remains to this day our oldest continuous industry.
Long before Columbus, the Vikings they did come. They found our waters full of fish, take back to their home. When Cabot sighted Newfoundland, he raised his hands in thanks, because he said without a doubt there's codfish in these banks.
The major commercial fishing regions lie in the shallows of the continental shelves, which occupy about 10% of the world's ocean area. The great depths of the mid-ocean regions are, in comparison, barren hunting grounds. The Grand Banks off the coast of Newfoundland is one of the best fishing areas in the world. In this region, two mighty currents clash, the cold Labrador Current and the warm Gulf Stream. Here the marine food chain begins. Plankton,
minute aquatic plants and animals, depend on sunlight which can penetrate the shallow waters of the banks. Fed on nutrients constantly stirred up from the bottom by the major currents, they rapidly reproduce. Small fish, which thrive in these clouds of plankton, in turn draw larger fish, which feed upon them. A variety of fish flourish off the northeastern shelf of North America. First, the bottom feeders, such as cod, sole, and perch. Powerful trawlers using an otter trawl drag the bottom, stir up the fish, and scoop them in like a vacuum cleaner. Another class of fish migrate in large schools and feed near the surface. The herring, mackerel, and salmon. Though there are several ways of catching these fish, two large-scale methods are most often employed: purse seining and gill netting. The gill net is set to hang like a curtain in the water. As the unsuspecting fish swim into the net, they become entangled by their gill covers. The other method, purse seining, is somewhat similar to corralling horses. The vessel circles the school of fish and then draws the bag-like net tight. The offshore fishing industry is a large, year-round operation. The majority offshore catch is made by powerful deep-sea vessels owned by the processing companies.
Oh, when the fishing is done, bring your catch home and sell it to me. I'll freeze them, unpack them, and send them away, far from their home in the sea.
In these modern plants, the fish are quickly cleaned and prepared for market. Depending on the market conditions, the fish may be chilled, frozen, canned, or cured. The fishing industry even squeezes profit from waste. The head, entrails, and scales can be reduced to animal feed, soap, oil, fertilizer, and pharmaceuticals. In the other sector of the industry, inshore fishing, there is still a role for the individual fisherman. He may own his own boat and labors long hours during the summer season.
Oh, a fisherman's life is a hard life working on the sea. But I'll tell you that a fisherman's life is a good enough life for me.
In Canada, in terms of volume, about 80% of the fish are netted in the Atlantic. Still, while the Pacific catch is so much smaller, the most valuable fish is the salmon. Off the coast of British Columbia, the salmon, which have journeyed for years in the Pacific, return to the rivers and streams to spawn. On their approach, large fleets move out to sea to intercept them, while individual fishermen snare the salmon upriver. The few who run this gauntlet batter their way upstream to lay their eggs and die. North to Alaska, where 20% of the value of the total United States catch is netted. In this storm-whipped environment, fortunes can be made and lost overnight. Beneath the waves, luring the fishermen, king crab, shrimp, and numerous other species. While the cold waters of the Pacific Northwest and the North Atlantic regions are fertile, it's in the warmer waters of the continental shelf where the greatest catches are made. Swarming off the coast of the southeastern states in the Gulf of Mexico is the menhaden. What this little fish lacks in size, it makes up in volume. The catch of menhaden is by far the largest tonnage of any species caught in North American waters. Crushed, it produces valuable oils. Ground, it provides animal feed. In the soup-warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico, sea products such as shrimp, crayfish, and oyster abound. The state of Louisiana alone provides half the shrimp consumed in the United States. Off the Pacific coast, the fishermen of Mexico and California hunt big and small game, the tuna and anchovy. California leads all other states in the value of fish caught.
The halibut, the salmon and the lobster and the crab, the scallop and the mussel and the skate, the pollock and the haddock and the little sardine are all very good to eat. Oh, a fisherman's life is a hard life, working on the sea. But I'll tell you that a fisherman's life is a good enough life for me.
Despite the promise of plenty, preferred location, and available technology, North American fishermen have been outdistanced by other nations. While world production has more than doubled since 1950, the growth of the fishing industry in North America has been at a standstill. Perhaps tradition, sticking to old ways, has been their biggest problem. Japan, Russia, China, Peru, and Norway are playing in a much bigger league. With larger fleets, floating factories, and ample government assistance, they roam the seas and scoop the fish up at will. North Americans struck back by declaring that their territory extends 320 kilometers offshore. The intent now is that nations will have first claim to the fish in their own waters. Other nations will have to bargain for a share of the remainder. But international regulations and quotas are hard to set because fish populations are difficult to estimate. Fish don't float to the surface to be counted. And when fish don't respect national boundaries as they range the seas, to whom do they belong? International fishing treaties, then, are just as vital to mankind as peace treaties. It's always easy to blame foreigners, but North America's own record is blemished. Overfishing is not the only cause of diminishing catches. The Great Lakes once supported numerous freshwater fisheries. Through ignorance, we contaminated the waters. A radical change is needed. As population grows, mankind will hunger for more fish, but this hunger will be satisfied only when the seas are properly managed. New gained knowledge should stimulate bold ideas. Plankton, the basic food stock of fish, could be nourished the same way we fertilize crops. Great feeding troughs could be established off the continental coasts. Harvest new species, such as Antarctic krill, which the great whales feed upon, in order to relieve the pressure on those fish we are now over-harvesting. Given a few years' breathing space, the net-weary species could restore themselves.
We gotta take care of the fish in the sea to feed you and me. We gotta take care, we really gotta take care. We gotta take care of life.
Man, the toolmaker, scratches and scrapes the reluctant earth. The artist fashions its riches. The warrior struggles to control the ground he beholds. Man, the builder, tunnels and mines the mineral treasures locked in the rock. Minerals, the building blocks upon which he creates his civilizations. Deep within the furnace of the Earth's interior, the elements churn, combine, separate, and recombine until they rise to the surface with 1,000 different faces. Minerals. Attractive amethysts. Delicate strands of asbestos. Business-like pyrite. Alluring seams of gold. Minerals, sought because they are scarce, because of their beauty, because of their usefulness. While each mineral is unique, they share some common characteristics. They are formed in nature from non-living materials. Look at the surface of halite, common salt. Its exterior shape hints at the way it is constructed internally. This crystal pattern is repeated to make up its interior structure. Though some minerals, such as gold, may have a lumpy exterior, microscopic examination reveals a regular crystalline pattern. It is the crust of the Earth, which we commonly call rock, that contains the minerals. About 85% of the crust is composed of one type of rock, igneous, formed from molten mantle material as the Earth cooled. It is in this igneous rock that some of the prized metal minerals such as gold, tin, iron, copper, and lead are found. But only in certain locations is it in sufficient quantities to be worth mining. Breaking through the old crust, an intrusion of igneous rock from the mantle carries up minerals close to the surface. Nickel, for example, in a molten state, might eventually settle out in this layer.
Race to show a new face, and over time even the creatures forever changing their features. Nothing remains the same, changes the name of the game. Nothing remains the same, changes the name of the game.
And so with rocks. Their form and composition can change through intense heat and pressure and the addition of chemicals. Another type of upwelling follows fissures in the crust. As the molten rock cools, it forces gases and superheated water, rich in minerals, to combine with the surrounding rock. When the rock in the crust is altered in this way, the newer rock is called metamorphic. This changed or metamorphic rock may contain many valuable metallic minerals. The Canadian Shield is the largest region of Precambrian rock in North America. For more than 2 billion years, these ancient mountains have been repeatedly pushed up and worn down and subjected to many intrusions of molten mantle material. Although metallic minerals are mined throughout the Canadian Shield, there are several major mineral-producing regions. Manitoba, Western Ontario, Sudbury, and a shared Ontario-Quebec region. In these regions, high concentrations of the principal metallic minerals are found: gold, silver, copper, nickel, zinc, and iron. Two other major mining regions exist in the Shield: Lake Superior and Labrador. The Lake Superior region, containing one of the largest concentrations of iron in the world, has been mined extensively since the late 1800s. As the high-grade ore of Superior ran out, the massive Labrador fields, stretching nearly 700 kilometers through Quebec and Labrador, were opened in the 1950s.
Shield, Canadian Shield, crown of the Northland, once mighty mountains, now riches come forth.
South of the Canadian Shield is another area of significant mineral deposits, the Appalachian Mountains. Here, a variety of metallic minerals are extracted, particularly in the northern regions: gold, silver, copper, zinc, and lead. In the southern Appalachians, two areas are somewhat unique: Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and Birmingham, Alabama. Located near each of these cities are deposits of iron, coal, and limestone, three major ingredients for the production of steel. And on the flanks of the Appalachian chain in the states of Georgia, Alabama, and Arkansas, there are important deposits of bauxite, from which aluminum is made. The continent's western margin is dominated by a system of lofty mountain ranges and deep depressions. The Western Cordillera. In the Yukon, rich silver-lead deposits. In British Columbia, copper, silver, zinc, and molybdenum. Idaho, known for its lead mines. Montana and Utah, renowned for their copper workings. In Bingham, Utah, the surface deposits of low-grade copper ore have been worked since the mid-1800s. In this open pit operation, the heart of a whole mountain is being removed. Trains carry the ore up the sides of the pit over hundreds of kilometers of track to the mill. The Colorado Plateau is a valuable source of gold, tungsten, and molybdenum. Gold, gold! That was the cry that echoed through California's Sierra Nevada mountains in 1848. More than a century later, this precious metal is still being mined in the area. In Mexico's Sierra Madres, silver, zinc, and lead. At Pachuca, silver has been mined since the 1500s. The mountains extending south through Panama have yet to be systematically prospected for minerals. The Caribbean islands of Cuba, the Dominican Republic and Jamaica, nickel and bauxite are extensively mined.
Metals are mined and refined, and melted and smelted and poured into ingots and bars, refined in smoke and fire. For platinum records and silver rings, leaded pane windows and airplane wings, and all a world of wondrous things.
From the map, it is apparent that the metallic minerals are found in the three major mountain regions. The two remaining regions, the interior plains and the Atlantic and Gulf Coast lowlands, contain minerals of a different kind, non-metallic minerals. These two regions, consisting of sediment washed down from the mountain chains, were once covered by ancient seas. This combination of sediment and salt water today yields the non-metallic minerals. Phosphate, a chemical salt, is used to make fertilizer and is mined in huge quantities in southern Florida. Under Saskatchewan lies a vast, dry ocean of potash, another non-metallic mineral, also used in the fertilizer industry. Potash production involves shaft mining because the ore lies deep underground. A shaft sunk from the surface connects with one or more horizontal tunnels. Miners drill and blast. The ore is crushed, then hoisted to the surface for additional processing. When a deep-lying ore can be melted or dissolved, another process is employed. In Louisiana, wells gush rivers of sulfur. Hot water is forced down pipes to the sulfur bed. The sulfur melts, sinks lower, and is pumped up into huge pools to be cooled, dried, and shipped. The mining of our mineral resources makes possible the ordinary and the extraordinary, the merely enjoyable and the death-defying. The great mineral wealth of North America originated with the birth of the universe. Once spent, minerals cannot be replaced.
Sparkling jewel in the crown of a king, the golden bracelet, silver ring, the stone, the bronze, the iron age. They write man's life on history's page, forever changing, forever growing, forever old, forever young. The sands of time are running now, the crystal seeds are growing underground. We search the earth forevermore for treasures sleeping in its core.
Since the turn of the century, 100,000 men who went down to the coal mines to provide us with energy never returned.
There's dark and danger deep in the ground. Dig in the coal that's there to be found. Look out for the gas, look out for the flood. Breathing in coal dust and coughing up blood. You dig like a mole, you sweat for your pay. From dawn till dark, you'll not see the day. There's many a coal miner's widow in black, grieves for the men who never came back.
Coal was formed between 250 and 345 million years ago. Vast swamps of moss-like plants and forests of giant ferns flourished in a constantly warm and wet climate. As these plants died, they sank into deep swamps of stagnant water. Layer upon layer, the dead vegetation piled up. But carbon dioxide gas, bubbling up through the water, formed a blanket over the swamp. This prevented oxygen from mixing with the water and breaking down the plants completely. As well, bacteria which feed upon dead plants could not survive in this poisonous liquid environment. The densely packed, partially decomposed plants became peat. As time passed, layers of mud and sand were deposited on these peat beds. As the layers built up, the peat was squeezed to form lignite, a low-grade coal. Over millions of years, new beds were created, older beds were buried. Under intense heat and pressure, the lignite was chemically altered to bituminous coal, the familiar black brittle substance. Finally, at the lowest level, a rock-hard coal in its most valued form, anthracite, almost pure carbon. Carbon, which those primitive plants donated, today burns with a fury in the presence of oxygen. Since the ancient forests were widespread over the supercontinent Pangaea, it is no surprise that coal is found in abundance in every continent today. With coal representing about 90% of all known fossil fuels in existence, it was only natural that men turned to coal as a substitute for wood when firewood became scarce. Originally, it was the British who mined coal commercially in the early 1700s. Conditions in the mines were horrible. Men choked in the foul, damp air, while women struggled with baskets of coal up to the mine head. And this poor fellow, wearing soaking rags for protection, had the short-term job of igniting pockets of explosive gas. As leaders of the Industrial Revolution, the British were the first to modernize the coal industry, with the introduction of steam-powered water pumps to overcome the threat of flooding. As industry grew, more and more coal was needed. Steam engines devoured it, and iron mills, which made the newfangled machines, swallowed it by the ton. But by the early 1900s, the emerging industrial giant, the United States, took over the leadership in the production and consumption of coal. 90% of their energy needs were now provided by coal.
Back in the days when coal was king, this is what we had to do. Load it on a train or a horse-drawn wagon and haul it from the mine to you. In the days of the ragtime melody that made you want to dance and sing, we kept the home fires burning bright when coal was king.
Over half of the world's known coal reserves are located in North America. enough it is estimated to last another 250 years. While coal is scattered over the continent, the most extensively mined regions are the Appalachian Field, the Illinois Field, and this one, extending from Iowa to Oklahoma. At this site, the coal is buried 3 kilometers beneath the surface. In order to reach it, a vertical shaft is driven down to the coal seams, and horizontal tunnels are bored into each coal bed with a machine called a continuous miner. Conveyor belts transport the coal to the surface where it is washed, crushed, and graded for transport by rail or sea. Today, coal provides North Americans with only 20% of their energy needs, and it's the electrical generating plants who are the prime users. But coal is making a comeback. Even the oil companies are betting on it, for they are now obtaining the mining rights to the rich western coal deposits which lie very close to the surface. With super scoopers, the coal companies plan to boost their annual production from 700 million tons to 1 billion tons in the next 5 years.
Back in the days of old King Coal, back in the days of steam, coal ran the mills and the factories and fired the industrial dream. Oh, can't you hear the whistle blow, and can you see them drivers roll? Gotta keep that furnace burning bright for old King Coal.
If machines of the Industrial Revolution required coal, they also required lubrication. And workers needed light to labor by. Lubrication and light were, for the most part, supplied by vegetable oil and foul-smelling whale oil. Yet it wasn't until the middle 1800s that the black, slimy oil, which seeped up from the earth, was developed as a substitute. Petroleum is also a fossil fuel. Its origins, however, are very different from coal. As trillions and trillions of tiny plants and animals which lived and swam in ancient seas died, their corpses drifted downwards and were covered quickly by silt washed down from rivers. Layer upon layer, deeper and deeper, animal matter and silt mixed. Crushed by pressure and cooked in the heat of the depths, these small water creatures were chemically changed into petroleum and natural gas. Later, the petroleum and gas filtered up through porous rock until it became trapped under non-porous layers above. In 1858, the first commercial oil well was successfully drilled in southwestern Ontario. But within a few years, American wells were outproducing those in Canada.
Oil from Texas and Pennsylvania feeds that North American mania. Go, 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 gotta grow, gotta grow, gotta grow. Everywhere I go, I see money and cars and people. That's the way we grow. More money, more cars, more people. Drill them wells and keep them gushing. Pump that gas and we'll go rushing around. Gotta go, 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 gotta grow.
How much petroleum exists in North America? In the 1960s, it was estimated that nearly 14% of the world's reserves lay in Canada and the United States. But, in spite of these reserves, North America consumed more oil than it produced. Tankers from Venezuela delivered oil to the port of Montreal, and convoys of supertankers from the Mideast shipped crude oil to the thirsty refineries along the coast of the United States. But the Arab-Israeli War of 1973 changed the cozy situation. Supplies were cut off and prices skyrocketed. The term energy crisis was coined. A new and desperate search for oil and gas on this continent began. Scanning with electronic instruments and conducting extensive test drilling, geologists probed the sedimentary basins where oil and gas are normally found. If oil is found, giant rigs are assembled at the site. After the crude oil has been pumped to the surface, it is transported by pipeline or tankers to distant refineries. The drive to find oil and gas has paid off handsomely, particularly north of the Arctic Circle. Large oil deposits in northern Alaska and rich gas reserves in the Mackenzie Delta have been discovered. In Mexico, recent surveys indicate the presence of more oil than is known to exist in all of Saudi Arabia. Canada's rich western oil fields and the Athabasca oil sands are turning sleepy cities into the new urban power centers of North America. In such centers, refineries convert crude oil to different types of fuel, which supply 75% of the heating and energy needs for North Americans. From natural gas, refineries produce tens of thousands of products that we now take for granted.
Butane, propane, ethylene, and kerosene. It's a gas. Shiny plastic Christmas trees and polyester suits. It's a gas. Gritty plastic flowers and synthetic rubber boots. It's a gas. Vinyl paints and aldehyde records and cassettes. It's a gas. Polystyrene coffee cups and kids' acrylic pets. It's a gas. Butane, propane, ethylene, and kerosene. It's a gas. It's a gas. It's a gas.
There is always a price to pay for a high standard of living. But we are living on borrowed time. Time belonging to future generations. Burning valuable fossil fuels the way we do, we will exhaust what is, after all, a limited resource.
Turn on the light, turn dark into light. It's easy. Open the bank, fill up the tank. It's so easy. Give us the good life, don't count the cost. Everything's gained and nothing is lost. Give us the good life, don't count the cost. Everything's gained and nothing is lost. Just turn it on, take all you want. It's easy.
10, 9, 8,
Just turn
7,
it on, take
6,
all you want.
5,
It's easy.
4, 3, 2. We have ignition. Commit liftoff. We have liftoff.
Matter and energy. Energy and matter. Two sides of the same coin. Energy is matter in motion. Energy is power. And our ability to harness this power, to put it to work, gives us the life we've come to expect.
Turn on the light, turn dark into light. It's easy. Open the bank, fill up the tank. It's so easy. Give us the good life, don't count the cost. Everything's gained and nothing is lost. Give us the good life, don't count the cost. Everything's gained and nothing is lost. Just turn it on, take all you want. It's easy. Just turn it on, take all you want. It's so easy. Just turn it on and take all you want. It's so easy. Just turn it on and take all you want. It's so easy. Just turn it on and take all you want. It's so easy. Just turn it on and take all you want. It's so easy.
Until the middle 1800s, North Americans relied mostly on wood for heat and animals for power. A small amount of wind and water, nevertheless, did help perform the routine chores. By the turn of the century, however, abandoned windmills hinted that a new source of power was taking over. Oh, it was still water power, but water used in a very different way to produce electricity. Canadians in particular had reason to jump at the opportunity. The land was pulsing with rivers, endless taps to provide trouble-free hydroelectricity. Stored behind immense reservoirs, the force of the released water, channeled to the turbine, spins the generator, which in turn produces electricity. Electricity can be transported efficiently over short distances, but is costly over long distances because too much power in the form of heat is lost along the transmission cables. Electrical development in the United States took a different direction. With a larger population base and greater industrial needs, they soon exhausted their available water sites. So the Americans turned to their immense fossil fuel reserves to fire most of their electric generators. The principle of electric generation is the same, only the power source differs. Coal, gas, or petroleum is burned in a furnace. The thermal energy, or heat, is then transferred to a boiler which produces high-pressure steam. The pressure of the steam rotates the turbine, and the generator responds with surging power. Thermal generating plants are a mixed blessing. Because they are located where needed, no power is lost through long transmission lines. But burning fossil fuels releases pollutants. When fumes from the stacks mix with water in the air, acid rain falls. Although the term energy crisis is on everyone's lips today, North Americans were well aware of the stark facts decades ago. Rivers were not limitless, and fossil fuels would run out. Another source of energy had to be found. This time, uranium.
Gentlemen, gentlemen, I've heard what you say about the needs of the people and the way we should grow. But I've heard people fear for the price we'll be paying for that nuclear power plant over by Point Lepreau. Over by Point Lepreau. Gentlemen, gentlemen, do you realize now that there is some doubt about the way we should go? Gentlemen, gentlemen, come let us be wise now, and let's go no further until we all know the right way to go.
Unfortunately, nothing but controversy surrounds the nuclear program. At present, nuclear reactors supply North America with less than 5% of its electrical power. And some experts claim that the little power they do supply is virtually canceled out by the amount of energy required to process the uranium. Nuclear reactors also produce radioactive waste. And a safe method of waste disposal has yet to be developed. While problems continue to plague the nuclear energy program, North Americans are taking a second look at their fossil fuels. In the United States, large companies are scrambling to develop their immense western coal deposits. Through a process known as gasification, coal is heated to produce synthetic fuels. Farther north are the largest deposits of oil sands in the world, which Canadians have just begun to develop. It's a slow process because the business of removing the overburden and extracting the oil from the Athabasca sands is a very costly one. Another school of thought urges that we direct all our research efforts into harnessing the sun.
It's the sun that moves the water. It's the sun that drives the wind. It's the sun that heats the earth day by day. Power. Changing weather, changing seasons, mighty rivers, raging winds, as the sun touches the earth day by day. Power.
The power of the sun is awesome. For example, on a sunny day, Lake Erie soaks up enough heat to meet all the energy needs of North America for that single day. On a small scale, the sun's rays can be trapped by solar collectors, but they are really only practical in the southern region of the continent. By heating water circulated through roof panels or converting sunlight to electricity, most of a household's energy needs can be provided for. Large solar collectors, which would power a whole city, are in the experimental stage. In the northern latitudes and in areas frequently blanketed in cloud, these solar collectors are not as practical. One imaginative idea is still on the drawing boards. The construction of satellites with a solar wingspread of several kilometers. The sun's rays are converted to microwaves and beamed down to receivers on Earth. There, the microwaves are changed to a usable form of electrical energy. As the sun bathes the Earth and evaporates water, winds are created. New designs in wind generators to produce electricity are now an attractive alternative in some locations. But with a little daring, one might consider the west coast of the continent. When winds sweep in from the sea, wind generators could pump water up to large mountain reservoirs. Then when the wind drops, water could be released to power hydroelectric generators. The Earth itself is an energy machine. Geysers such as these are evidence that high temperatures beneath the surface are being released by tectonic activity. In Mexico, for example, this natural steam is used to power turbines called geothermal energy. It is estimated that this form of energy could supply North Americans with half their needs. Because most of the hot spots lie deep within the Earth, this presents problems. The science of deep drilling is still in its infancy.
Turn on the light, turn dark into light. It's easy. Open the bank, fill up the tank, it's so easy. Give us the good life, don't count the cost. Everything's gained and nothing is lost. Give us the good life, don't count the cost. Everything's gained and nothing is lost. Just turn it on, take all you want, it's easy. Just turn it on, take all you want, it's easy.
If North Americans want to continue to lead the good life, a major breakthrough in energy technology is needed, and soon. We may, in fact, have to learn to steal the fire of the stars themselves. Strange that the most abundant element in the universe, hydrogen, has been the last fuel to gain our attention. It is hydrogen atoms, crushed by the immense pressure of gravity that creates cosmic explosions, builds galaxies, and fuels the stars. One star, our sun, has burned with a fury for billions of years by a self-sustaining process known as fusion. So scientists are attempting to build nuclear ovens, copying the fusion of stars, here on Earth. And they have discovered the special form of hydrogen required, deuterium, which exists in seawater. Once the hydrogen fuel is heated to over 100 million degrees, it will continue to fuse and produce immense heat with only traces of radioactivity. There's a catch, of course. No material in the world can contain this heat. Two possible solutions to the problem show promise. One is to contain the superheated fuel in a strong magnetic field. The other technique is to hit pellets of the hydrogen fuel with laser beams. To date, however, more energy is required to power the laser than is released in the fusion process. When the dream of fusion power is realized, no nation will enjoy a favored geographic position. Hydrogen, the very stuff of the oceans, belongs to mankind. From hydrogen, boundless energy that moves matter, that moves nations, that moves our lives. Indeed, with fusion, the world will not only be able to afford North Americans, but afford the life all have come to expect. Steel, 900 kilograms. Iron, 200. Plastic, 80. Glass, 50. Rubber, 40 kilograms. The end of the line. 1,500 kilograms of scrap. But in this case, the end is only the beginning. One automobile is consumed. A new one is born. Manufacture. At one time, the word meant to make by hand. Today, manufacture means to make with machines. With machines, we create products that satisfy our wildest fantasies.
Make a fantasy for me. Make it shining, make it sleek. Make it trendy, make it chic. Oh, technology, plug me into fantasy. Marge and Sam in 83 bought themselves a new TV. Now the kids all live at home, and Marge has got a Vista phone, a microwave and self-serve bar, and Sam puts hydrogen in his car. The kids are growing up just fine. George will graduate in time. Mary's dolls can speak in German, French and Greek, and Mary's learning how to use a laser slicer. Makes the kitchen seem much nicer. Make a fantasy for me. Make it shiny, make it sleek. Make it trendy, make it chic. Oh, technology, plug me into fantasy.
So many wonderful things. We manufacture them, literally, from the ground up. The example of the car provides a glimpse of the manufacturing process. Every part of a car comes from the ground. And the industries which extract the raw materials from the earth are called the primary industries. The first stage could begin here, on Galva Bay in northern Quebec. Not far under the surface are huge deposits of iron. But it takes energy to extract it from the ground, energy that just isn't available. But 600 kilometers to the south, sitting on the same iron ore deposit, is Schefferville. Nearby is the huge Churchill Falls hydroelectric development. This is the frontier of the iron mining industry. The iron deposits are rich, and energy is available to concentrate the ore. A recently constructed railway links Schefferville with the outside world. Each year, 5.5 million tons of ore leave the site. Remote as it is, it pays to mine here. This is Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Pittsburgh has its own iron ore deposits. But it also has the enormous coal deposits of the Appalachians, quarries for limestone, essential to the refining process, and a ready labor force. Blast furnaces produce raw iron, known as pig iron, which has a high carbon content. Then in the open hearth furnace, the carbon content of the pig iron is reduced and metals like nickel or chromium are added. The final product is raw steel, the single largest ingredient in automobile manufacturing. Meanwhile, 3,000 meters below the ground, vast pools of oil and gas await to contribute to the birth of the car. Typically, oil and gas are piped thousands of kilometers from the wellhead to the refineries, where they will be converted to plastics and synthetic rubber. So many different materials go into the making of a car that we can trace its roots to every corner of North America. From the raw materials supplied by primary industry, a second grade class of industries produce semi-finished or finished products. These are called the secondary industries.
Put all the pieces together and make me an automobile. Behind the wheel, I long to feel. Give it a spark and the motor will start in my automobile. This is the life for me. Each little part is dear to my heart, just like a melody. So when everything fits and the car is a hit, then send it along to me. Put all the pieces together and make me an automobile. This is the life for me.
There are many factors that companies take into consideration when looking for a location to build their plants. This company supplies windshields. It chose this site so that it could buy cheap electricity to produce glass. Another supplier chose to build its factory as near as possible to the car assembly plant in order to keep their shipping costs low. And finally, this company, which makes electrical parts for cars. It selected this location to be near a large labor force. So energy, supply of raw materials, distribution, market, and labor determine where secondary industries locate. The site which is finally chosen is based on those combinations which allow the manufacturer to produce goods at the lowest cost. Of all the possible locations, Detroit became the automotive center of the world. Why? Well, partially, it was an accident of history. Henry Ford, who lived in the area of Detroit, was the first auto manufacturer to introduce the assembly line. The assembly line gave Ford's Motor Company a tremendous lead over his competitors, and he hired the best engineers and designers of the time. Like a magnet, his success attracted other secondary manufacturers to feed the booming car industry. Detroit is situated on the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway system and is close to major railways and roads. From all over North America, raw materials roll into this hub to be dispatched as finished cars. All these factors enabled the car industry to prosper in Detroit. But if Detroit appeared to be the ideal city, why weren't all cars built in this central location? Because there are other factors that play a role. Factors which encourage decentralization. That is, the building of branch plants throughout the country. Politics is one important influence. Governments want manufacturing within their own borders to provide employment and stimulate the growth of local industries. For example, the Canadian government gives the American car makers a break on taxes and duty if they manufacture in Canada. So cars are produced in such places as Windsor and Oakville in Ontario and Sainte-Thérèse in Quebec. Politics also influenced the Ford Motor Company to build an assembly plant near Mexico City. A brand new car. Once this car rolls off the assembly line, the third great class of industries takes over. The tertiary, or service industries.
Gotta fix that watch, gotta clean those clothes. Wanna go out to eat, need new soles for the feet. Don't wanna get wet in the rain, just pop pills for the pain. Shots for the dog and fireplace logs go round and round in a poor man's brain.
Nearly every product at one time or another needs repair or maintenance. The tertiary industries service the manufactured products and the consumer. Unlike secondary industries, the tertiary industries locate closer to consumers. Large service companies have branch offices in small towns and cities to maintain close contact with customers. Banks which provide loans, insurance companies which extend protection, hospitals which provide health care, and theaters which entertain.
You can get through a loan or a telephone in the service industry. You can change your clothes or strike a pose in the service industry. You can test your brain and catch a train and find good company. So when you look around, most jobs are found in the service industry.
Primary, secondary, tertiary. Industries so linked and interconnected that they become heavily dependent on each other. 1979, the Chrysler crisis. The third largest car manufacturer is in trouble. Its design and technology haven't kept up with the competition. Sales have dropped drastically. Chrysler appeals for government help. 600,000 jobs are threatened at Chrysler alone. But more, 2 million jobs in other industries will be threatened if Chrysler folds. So the government responded, and Chrysler was saved. In North America today, 1 out of every 5 people works directly or indirectly in industries related to the automobile. Or from the ground, refined and crafted into 3,800 separate parts, assembled, serviced, and transported to carry more ore, to be refined and crafted into 6,500 separate parts, to be assembled, serviced, and transported to carry more ore, to be refined and crafted into 8,900 separate parts. The story of transportation in North America begins here, on the ground. When the Spanish explorer Cortez reached Mexico some 500 years ago, he found a transportation system capable of carrying goods and messages regularly through the kingdom of the Aztecs. Runners carried not only reports from distant officials, but also jaguar skins and gold, destined for trading centers. Moving things to places where they're wanted. That, essentially, is what transportation is all about.
Wheels and keels, wagons and ships, open up a new land. Rails and sails, rigs and wings, link a continent.
Between 1770 and 1870, these uncomfortable and unhealthy vessels, known as coffin ships, brought from the British Isles to North America 11 million immigrants. James McMullen, an Irish immigrant who came across the Atlantic, wrote in his diary, June the 4th, somewhere on the Atlantic. The start of our 5th week at sea in the miserable, dark hold of the Lord Norton. Of the 500 souls who sailed from Ireland with us, 63 are dead from sickness, their bodies thrown overboard. In this black and breathless hull, where we are pitched and rolled, often wet, always short of food and water, many more will die before these 9 weeks of hell end. One human wave after another washed over the eastern shore of the continent, and new immigrants in search of work and land were forced farther and farther west. They began their journey by train, changed to boats at the Mississippi, and continued by wagon nearly 1,500 kilometers across bleak, hostile country. Again from the diary of James McMullen. April 7, 1843. 7th month on the trail. 10 miles today. The dust so thick I can hardly breathe. 2 cups of water today was all we could spare. Used the last of the flour for 3 loaves of cornbread. More skeletons near a dry water hole. Some Indians passed us today. There are extra guards tonight.
The golden west is calling me. The open space is wild and free. Westward with the sun, the outlaw and the gun. We'll win the last frontier before we're done.
Once they built their homesteads, they needed a continual supply of tools and equipment for farming. The bachelors wanted wives. Almost everybody wanted sugar and salt and whiskey. In the 1860s, a new transportation system followed the growing settlements. Across the plains, through the mountains, and down into the fertile valleys, laying track for the most part in the very ruts the wagon wheels had ground into the earth. The population grew, and with it the need for Eastern manufactured goods. At the same time, Western beef and agricultural products found a ready market in the East, and the railways obliged. A railway map in 1869 looked like this, and like this in 1916. Railways made good economic and political sense. They took goods and people where they were needed. Coast-to-coast railways tied the edges of the broad continent together. New York and California could now feel part of the same union. Nova Scotia and British Columbia were linked in one vast dominion. By the end of World War I, there was enough track in North America to cover the distance from sea to sea 50 times. The railway was king. No one who caught the train home from college at Christmas or shipped his cattle and sheep on the local freight would have believed that the railway supremacy was about to be challenged by, of all things, motor vehicles and airplanes. By the mid-1920s, there was tense competition over the transportation dollar. One of the early confrontations was over control of mail delivery in the United States, which had been for years the monopoly of the railroads. In 1910, long-distance mail was carried almost exclusively by railways. But within 15 years, the number of trucks used to move mail from city to city rose from 10 to 2,000. And and the number of aircraft in service as mail carriers jumped from 3 to 100. Soon, most mail was carried by planes and trucks. Railroads could no longer compete. Next came the battle for passengers. Through the 40s and 50s, traveling businessmen were lured away from the railways to the airlines. In the 1960s, larger commercial aircraft enabled airlines to offer speed and economy to exotic places, and the age of the charter flight burst upon the world.
We're the jet generation. Ain't no place that we've never been. We're the jet generation. Gotta be a part of the scene. We're the backpack standby hippie invaders. We're the peace-loving tie-dyed free love crusaders. Rough it with the peasants in the Yucatan. Get spiritual awareness and a great suntan. We're the jet generation. Ain't no place that we've never been. We're the jet generation. Gotta let the world know we're here.
During those years when large numbers of rail travelers were attracted by the cheap fares and fast flights of the airlines, a major change was taking place. From the 40s to the 60s, the number of trucks and automobiles increased from 34 million to 68 million. With that increase came the rapid expansion of the highway system, and millions of North Americans now discovered the freedom and convenience of the car. Business as well soon realized the economy of the truck for shipping goods such as the necessities that we consume daily. Potatoes from Prince Edward Island, fish from British Columbia, grapes from California, tomatoes from Mexico. In 1920, a map of paved roads looked like this. By 1970, like this. Everywhere, the story was the same. Costly track laid through the rough Mexican interior to carry melons and tomatoes to market came to be largely ignored. Trucks were cheaper, faster. In the West Indies, numerous short spur lines quietly rusted away. Still, where the product is bulky, railways remain the ideal carriers. Grain from the prairies, minerals from remote mines, and newsprint for far-flung cities. Increasingly, shipping lines, trucking companies, and rail lines are entering into a marriage of convenience to reduce fuel and labor costs. Containers of goods are loaded aboard ship and then transported piggyback on trains to urban centers.
I'm a working man and they call me a trucker, and I'm always on the go. Driven all the way from the Arctic Circle to the Gulf of Mexico. 10-4, good buddy, you can always find me on your CB radio. I've been a long, long way, I got a long, long way to go. White line fever on my mind. White line fever, gotta roll in right on time. I got 18 wheels on a big diesel rig, got a hot coffee on my dash. I feel real fine and I'm making up time and I'm listening to Johnny Cash. If a smoky don't get me, you can always find me on your CB radio. I've been a long, long way, I got a long, long way to go. White line fever on my mind. White line fever, gotta roll in right on time.
These are only the most visible elements in the transportation system. Controlling their routes, cargoes, departures, and arrivals is a less visible and infinitely more complex network. Communications, the system that transports information. Electronic communications began modestly enough in the 1850s with the telegraph. By the time the 1920s were roaring, people were only a phone call away. At about the same time, information and entertainment were beamed into almost every home. By the end of the 1930s, some people said we'd gone about as far as we could go. Then it hit. The electronic deluge, sudden and dramatic. New devices, new terms. Television, computers,
Satellites, telemetry, chips, resistor, transistor, input, output, FCC, CRTC, teleprinter, teletypesetting, photofacsimile transmission, laser, phaser, pulse code modulation, simulcast simulation.
More and more news about the weather, the price of oil, the movement of wheat, the cost of tuna, snow conditions, heartbeats, rising stocks, heavy rock. More than ever before, information where and when we need it. Transportation, the lifeline that pulses through the continent. A system we accept as naturally as breathing. A system as vital as breathing.